University Recycling Coalition webinar. My name is Travis Friedman, and I'm the Sustainability and Energy Manager at the University of Puget Sound, and I will be your moderator today. This webinar is part of the free Kirk Technical Webinar Series, which are designed to provide trends, information, and perspectives about recycling. We are hosting these webinars every other month on the first Thursday, so if that's not confusing enough, we'll also be hosting them from 1 p.m. until 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Before we go ahead and get started, I wanted to thank our series sponsors, the Alcoa Foundation, and our session sponsors, Landmark Studio and Design, for making this webinar possible, and go over a few housekeeping notes before we begin today's webinar. If you have technical problems during the webinar, you can call GoToWebinar's customer support line at 800-263-6317. If you experience sound quality issues, please try hanging up and dialing back in. Because of the size of the audience, all of your lines are muted, but you can submit questions at any time using the question panel on the right side of your screen. Any other concerns you might have can be addressed using the chat function, which is at the bottom of your control panel. One final housekeeping note, we will be placing the slides and a recording of the webinar on the Kirk site as soon as we can, so that we can review all the sessions or share them with your colleagues. Okay, let's get started. I'm pleased to be joined by two great speakers. Nicole Chardoux, Principal and Vice President of RRS, and Melissa Dupuis, the Sustainability Officer at the University of Winnipeg. Nicole brings 15 years of engineering and experience management to RRS. She is instrumental in all aspects of projects requiring engineering experience and is a leading healthcare project manager, organics project designer, construction manager, and compost engineer, if that wasn't all enough. Nicole has extensive knowledge of engineering, pollution prevention, recycling, and composting facility construction oversight, as well as equipment and system procurement for various types of green projects. Nicole has trained compost site operators and managers on operational protocols and site design since 2000, and has served on local compost regulatory review committees to encourage composting and food diversion from the landfill. Her expertise in nonprofit healthcare and university settings is essential for most sustainable projects. Nicole holds a BS in Civil and Environmental Engineering from the University of Michigan. Nicole, go ahead and take it away.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks for the great introduction, Travis. This slide is just an introduction to our company. And I won't go into details, but we've been in business for almost 30 years now, providing solutions around recycling, composting, resource management, and exciting zero waste programs here that have been kicking off over the last 5 years. So you'll hear more about what we do during my presentation, but I just thought I'd give that overview. And I'd like to start this presentation with a quote from Wendell Berry. He's a writer and farmer. This is from an article of his written in 1977 called The Unsettling of America, Culture, and Agriculture. The soil is the great connector of lives, the source and destination of all. It is the healer and restorer and resurrector by which disease passes into health, age into youth, death into life. Without proper care for it, we can have no community, because without proper care for it, we can have no life. And I think this really wraps, why I do what I do in terms of promoting composting, healthy soils, and healthy communities. And hopefully that has some connection for you as well. So during this afternoon's presentation, I'll be talking about, why are we talking about food waste, and then talking a little bit about some policy supporting food waste reduction and composting. And some regulations and trends that you may or may not be aware of, and just to be, just a reminder to look into what's happening in your local community. What type of considerations then would you make in terms of planning and programming food waste collection or composting program at your college or university? And then I'll go into some details about collection and processing options, cost and environmental considerations. This chart is probably familiar to many of you, so it's the EPA's food waste hierarchy. It's available on their website with a lot of details about each one of these methods, going from most preferred at the top to least preferred at the bottom. But I'd like to remind everyone that this is what most of us follow by, first trying to reduce the waste in the first place by making smart purchasing decisions around food and food packaging. A lot of times there's also some education that can be done about expiration dates and food preservation, where we think the food might not be good anymore, but it's just fine. It can be, it still can be consumed. And then, if possible, when you have leftover food that hasn't been served, it's always a great option to donate to a food bank. There are a lot of underserved and hungry people that could use leftover food. Oftentimes, and this really depends on your region, the hog farmers are looking for feed, and leftover food is wonderful for this option. A lot of times farmers will actually come to your dock and pick up food waste, sometimes free of charge. So that's always something to look into. When you're not able to donate food, then we start looking into what can we do with it, either on-site or off-site. And so then we start talking about, anaerobic digestion and composting, and of course that's what we're going to focus on this afternoon. And the next slide, just some photos of some of the other benefits of managing food waste. So waste prevention and reduction saves money and protects our environment, reduces our carbon footprint by not having to produce so much in the first place, and then just throw it in the landfill and emit greenhouse gas to the atmosphere. So we want to prevent and reduce as much as possible. Oftentimes, managing food waste creates an incentive to educate and encourage other sustainable practices, such as recycling, waste reduction, and social responsibility. There's a lot of connection with students and faculty, visitors, when this type of program is visible as well. It improves public health and educates our future generations on local, healthy food and healthy soil. It supports local farmers, urban agriculture, and it closes the loop for healthy food. This slide has a lot of data in it, but what I want to point out is in the blue cloud in the upper right corner, that food waste represents 25% of U.S. methane emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions. So we can have a huge impact by reducing and managing our food waste correctly. 1/3 of our municipal solid waste is food-related, so that's either food or food packaging waste. 43% of that comes from the consumer. So, there's food waste along the food system, from agriculture to processing and distribution. But the majority of it is coming from those end users, the people who buy the food at the grocery store, our cafeterias, and so we can have a huge impact. In cafeterias, each meal tray generates about a half a pound of food waste. So that's quite a bit. And oftentimes a cafeteria is what we consider a closed system, where we control through our food service providers, what is served and how that is disposed. So it's a good place to start a zero waste campaign. So the next slide really gives overview of the types of categories I'm going to talk about when planning a program. So we're going to start with talking about material, and we're going to go into some logistics of collection and processing. I'll give some examples of some financial and capital and operating cost options for different processing methods, and then the importance of education and training. So what I mentioned earlier is making sure that before you really dive into designing your program, that you'll want to look and see what's happening on the regulatory side. On the next slide. And so, there's a lot of national trends for zero waste and for large generators to require to divert their organic waste from the landfill. So the state of Connecticut, state of Vermont, state of Massachusetts, recently the state of Rhode Island. There's many cities doing the same thing. And that's going to start to impact generators such as large institutions as well, because they're producing typically more than 2 tons a week, which most of these are 1 to 2 tons a week limit. So that's something that you'll want to be aware of and help to promote as well. There are some campaigns and committees that you could probably be involved in at the state level. Regionally, your local region, there may be some things happening at the county level. There are food policy councils looking at food waste as part of the food system. There are county solid waste plants that most likely have compost sites and other, cited in their site plan, as well as zero waste and landfill diversion goals. So again, some place to get involved and to be aware of what's happening regionally and then locally as well. Your college or university probably has, or you're working on developing a sustainability plan. So use that to, as a mechanism to roll out a program such as food waste collection and composting. Next slide. Some other examples of policies and how they drive composting, food waste reduction, is that there could be some local purchasing, green purchasing policies at your college or university or at the county level where certain food service ware would be encouraged or required, such as some reusable, compostable, and recyclable. So that could have a big impact on your program. There's also some municipalities that have year-round compostables collection or working toward building that, and having a university or college supporting that effort is can have a big impact. Some communities are going to every other week garbage collection and promoting weekly recycling and composting collections. So the more the volume of food waste that's generated at your facility can feed into that program and support it. Either within your university or maybe within the community, there might be some zero waste initiatives happening at sporting events, maybe public events, festivals and that sort of thing. And so There are a lot of collaborators that you can work with, partners, whether they're haulers, composters, and farmers. So the more you're plugged into what's happening in your community, the more successful your program will be. And next slide, please. So still talking about material here, one of the first things you do after you look into sort of the policies and regulations around what's happening, and also I'll mention now too, is looking at what type of composting sites are out there. Forgot to mention that on the last slide. And what they're able to take. Do they have the capacity for more volume? Do they have hauling capacity and processing capacity for food waste? So that's something that you'll definitely want to research. So next, you'd want to assess the volumes of food waste and your potential participation. So food waste can be combined with, yard waste, food service, compostable food serviceware, maybe soiled paper towel from the bathrooms, even animal bedding if you have a research lab on campus. And the food waste can come from the kitchens, cafeterias, lounges, cafes and kiosks. Grounds and landscaping would have the yard waste. And so you'll want to do, if you haven't already done a waste composition study, you can do this looking at invoices. You can actually do a waste sort at 1 or 2 locations. So you'd want to determine what percentage of your overall waste is recyclable and compostable, and then break out those compostables into those different categories. And so that would be one step. And then the next slide, it's really getting a little bit more into the details of the food waste. And so you have, let's say you have 3 residence halls, and you've determined the participation rate is about 80%. One meal of just food waste would be about 1/3 of a pound, and then maybe if you have BioWare or compostable serviceware, it might be more like 1/2 pound, or here I show 0.6 pounds. And so then you can calculate based on the number of meals that are served each day in each residence hall the total volume or total weight generated. And so here I'm showing, let's say, with the BioWare or compostable serviceware, you're looking at almost 1,000 pounds generated per day in this example. And so you'd want to do the same for your location. What you can do then with that number is convert it to number of tons per year. So let's say that would be maybe like this 87 shown in this chart here. If you decide then to compost on site, you have a number to work with. And so you could use that 87 tons per year and design an in-vessel composter on campus. And you can also use that number to share with potential haulers and composters, and if you need to send that out to bid, and they can work with you to help design a program for hauling and processing your food waste. And if you plan to compost on-site, you will want to go through a process of determining your compost recipe, because you'll need to add some yard waste and wood chips and maybe some soiled cardboard to your food waste in order to obtain that optimal carbon to nitrogen ratio and moisture content. And there are some calculators available on the EPA website on their food recovery page, and so you can use that to get a general idea of what other feedstock may be necessary if you decide to do composting on site. So just a little background on doing your calculations on your volumes. So on the next slide, I have a few more examples of some other partnerships or collaborators. I talk about this a lot because it's really important for your program to be sustainable. During and after your program rollout, you will need to, educate and oversee the program, and so you would need some funding for that. You'll want to be talking to your food service providers, food service vendors from the very beginning, talking about, recyclable versus compostable food serviceware, and also the selections they make for the food. Because some food generates more waste than others, there might be some local food options that you might want to select as well. I think I've talked enough about the policies and regulations. So the infrastructure and space here, you will need to talk with, your plant operations and facilities folks. You'll need space for bins. You'll need room at the dock, or you'll need a place to put an in-vessel composter. So start talking and collaborating both internally and externally as soon as possible. You'll then want to talk with, your food service staff, and maybe you have some third-party vendors operating your cafes and kiosks. So, and athletics might have some food waste as well and some zero waste goals separate from what you're doing throughout the rest of the university. So there are a lot of folks that you can talk to and work together to make your program as efficient and effective as possible. So on the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit more detail on the logistics here of what to expect in terms of in-building collection and infrastructure. So for your pre-consumer waste, that's in the kitchen, or the food prep waste, there, lots of different ways to collect this, but typically it goes right from the prep station directly into a Brute or a Slim Jim. Depending on your operations, you may want to line those bins with compostable liners, or you might not want to line those bins. It just depends on how those are going to be serviced, and whether or not compostable liners are acceptable in your composting program. Often kitchens will run their food waste, both prep waste and post-consumer waste, through a pulper. And so that's an option for you. What a pulper will do is it'll break it down and dewater at the same time, and so you end up hauling less liquid. But they do cost some money, and as well as money, do cost money to operate and maintain. You'll need bins in your sort of public space areas to collect food waste, so you'll need to convert some of your trash containers to compostables or to compost containers. So things to consider around your design of your bins, signage, and education. You'll need some staffing. You need to consider staffing, food service staffing, how to manage trays, how to manage dishware. Will you be have reusable or compostable? All things to consider. This slide just has a little bit more detail on a dewatering or digester option, where it could cost $25,000 to $50,000, really depending on the size and model. And they do tend to cost about $20 to $50 per ton. This, at the end of going through this process, it's not composted food waste. So it's either, we hate to see this go right to the landfill, but that does happen sometimes. So it's great to be able to take that dewatered food waste and then compost it. So you'd still want a method to collect that dewatered or pulped food waste and incorporate it into a composting program. Let's see, next slide. At the dock itself, you'll need to consider what type of program you want to haul your food waste. Some vendors offer a cart swap program where they come with clean, empty carts, and they swap your full carts for those. Sometimes you might be able to empty your carts right into a compactor, and there are some really nice designs out there now, designed specifically for food waste. But once again, you need the space at your dock to be able to have a dedicated compactor or dedicated dumpsters. That's very specific to what's available. Next slide. And then, so here's a picture of a dock with a dumpster dedicated to food waste, which is really wonderful. So from there, the food waste can be hauled to an off-site composting facility, or maybe it's within your campus. That again depends on what do you have available. Do you have a building available for an in-vessel composter or a worm composter? Do you have space available for any type of windrow or static pile composting, or does it need to be taken off-site to a third-party composter? So oftentimes composting programs, and whether you do it on-site or off-site, the cost of that, which I'll get into next, has a big impact, but space is usually one of the first determining factors. Next, so transporting requires a truck, and so if you have your own truck, or if you're willing to invest in a food waste collection truck, then that's wonderful. But it does cost money. So if you're able to work with a hauler that's already in the area collecting food waste or collecting yard waste and food waste, then that's a great option. So again, working with your partners and collaborators is very important. Next slide. So I'm going to get a little bit, this is a more financial example, and so this is an example. The numbers were a case study that we had done. So these numbers are not, would have to be specific to your program. But I want to walk you through them anyway. So so we are, the best option would be to avoid food waste. There are no capital costs. You've got the avoided disposal by not having to send it to a landfill. We're assuming in this example it's $50 per ton tip fee. It'll vary depending on where you are. And then the environmental benefit, for every ton of food waste avoided, almost 2 tons of carbon dioxide are avoided. So huge benefits to just avoiding food waste in the first place. Next slide. For small-scale on-site composting, really small scale would be backyard composting in a residential sense. But at a university, we're talking about these small in-vessel composters. It could be a worm bin. It could be like this earth bin. These can cost anywhere from $15,000 to $25,000 more if you need to shred your food waste, which is an option. You have finished compost in 2 to 4 months, but it varies depending on your climate. So this is great to put behind, if you have a small campus and you have not a lot of food waste, and you would want to put this behind, your residence hall or cafeteria. There is some capital costs associated with this, as I mentioned, so it's about $60 per ton. But again, you're avoiding landfill disposal costs, you're saving on transporting costs, and you have those environmental benefits associated with that. So it's a great option for smaller volumes. Next slide. When you have larger volumes, you'll want to collect it and take it to a central location, whether it's on-site or off-site. So in this example, you're collecting a source-separated collection, so food waste only. The food waste only collection programs are very expensive just because you have a dedicated truck and you're transporting food waste only, which is heavy. Often it's heavy, and the trucks need to be designed so they're sort of leak-proof. So they tend to have high capital costs for that equipment and very high collection costs. Next slide. If there is an option to co-collect with yard waste, really this would be your best option. So if your municipality, or even if you have a lot of yard waste with your grounds department, it's best to collect with yard waste just because a truck most likely is already out there collecting yard waste, and so to add food waste to their route is just a marginal cost increase. And so it both has operating and environmental cost benefits, I guess. There might be some, you will have some capital costs associated with buying carts and dumpsters possibly, but really co-collecting with yard waste is better than source separated in terms of cost. Next slide. So out of those examples, here's a chart just showing them side by side, where you have, the costs and environmental costs. So you've got your food waste and small scale on-site actually being a negative cost or a benefit, and then you've got your source separated organics on the far right, which has the highest cost, and commingled with yard waste, sort of in the middle there. So that's collection performance. So in the next slide then, just run through quickly some processing options for you. Windrow composting, let's assume that this is happening at there might be a composting facility in your region, or that you already have some yard waste compost happening with your grounds department, and so let's assume that you already have a facility. So there's not a whole lot of cost by adding food waste to an existing windrow, like a yard waste windrow composting site. You're still avoiding your landfill tip fees and landfill emissions. There are some costs for some site improvements, maybe an extra pad to unload a truck of food waste. But if you already have the equipment and the site, then they're very marginal cost to adding food waste. And just a rule of thumb here at the bottom, operating parameters, just for you to start thinking about this. If you have about 1,000 tons of food waste, or food waste and yard waste, you'll need about an acre of windrows. So just to give you an idea of how large your site should be. You'll need some additional space for unloading, final curing. So the windrow portion is probably about a third of what you would need. So you might need maybe 3 to 4 acres total for 1,000 tons of material. Next slide. And so this is an aerated static pile, again, assuming that there's something available for you to add food waste to. Again, the cost difference between this and windrows isn't huge. Instead of using a windrow turner to aerate and turn your piles, the infrastructure is set up right on the pad to feed air into your piles. So it tends to be quite a cost-effective method for composting. And so next slide shows a slightly different aerated static pile, or ASP, so it's covered ASP. What will happen here with food waste is with the additional volumes of food waste, you probably will need additional covers, and these covers can be quite expensive. And so there will be an additional capital cost associated with covered aerated static pile that you might not have with the aerated static pile. But overall, operating costs are about the same. Environmental benefits are about the same. Next slide. In-vessel composting is something, this is large-scale in-vessel composting, and so the equipment itself tends to be expensive, but once it's operating, there's some maintenance associated with equipment, but it tends to be an efficient way to compost food waste. And there are a lot of different options out there, different sizes, depending on your volumes. The composting process can be anywhere from 10 days to 4 months. It depends on if you, most of these systems do recommend or require a shredding ahead of time, and then curing of the final compost at the end. So once it gets through the system, then you still would need to do a final cure of the compost. But again, environmental benefits are about the same in terms of landfill emissions that you've saved and landfill tip fees that you've saved as well. So just a little extra in equipment purchase and possibly a building. And then you've got the anaerobic digesters. So these are expensive. If you have the volumes, then it's a nice way to go because you can generate methane and then convert that to generate electricity. You still would want to, compost your digestate, and so there is still, you get both the methane production and the compost. And so it's a nice option if you have a partner for the capital, if you have enough volume, if you have the space. There are some wastewater treatment plants that have anaerobic digestion systems built in. And so that's, I guess, another thing to look into, to check and see if your local wastewater treatment plant does do AD. Because if they do, and then make sure that they compost their digestate or the biosolids. If they do that, that's an option. If you have food waste that's high in high moisture content, then that's a nice option. Or if you decide to use a food disposer in your kitchens and send it to the wastewater treatment plant, there might be some partnerships that you might be able to build there. And the next slide, I just want to show the different, this is just processing, and so the actual processing of the small scale on-site actually has this is dollars per ton, high processing cost because it's a small system. So it takes some labor and cost to operate those small in-vessels, food waste only. Now the other options here are commingled with yard waste, and so it tends to be just a big marginal cost increases to add food waste to those other options. But the next slide is really combining both the collection and the processing. And so overall system performance, you can see that, of course, food waste prevention is your best option in terms of cost, both economic and environmental costs. They're all negative, which is a benefit. For small-scale on-site, there will be some capital and operating costs, but good environmental benefits there, and overall, it's an overall benefit, the small-scale on-site. Now, that's with small volumes. So once you get into the high volumes, you're looking at best options would be like the windrow system or the aerated static pile options tend to be the lowest cost and options for you, as well as the highest environmental benefits. So once again, this was an example. I think that if you run your own numbers, it might look a little bit different. But I hope it gives you some guidelines for making decisions on moving forward in terms of how to go about making decisions around processing. So on the next slide, just to review, you'd want to then once you have your volumes and you've considered, taken all these considerations into account, develop a business case. Review costs specific to your location and staffing. Make the case, show the payback for these different options, and then show how the program would help achieve your sustainability or diversion goals. And then you want to develop community awareness. So community could be within the university or college, it could be your staff, it could be community-wide on the next slide. And you want to show how compost, or educate how compost can be used to grow local healthy food, maybe work with local farmers to demonstrate that. It can be used in your landscaping. It can be provided to students and employees to take home. So the more sort of local systems, the more local you can develop, more local system you can develop and operate, the more will support local farmers, create local jobs, and promote community awareness. In terms of educating, there's education both, pre and post program development, but there's technology. Your university probably has some GIS experts. There's a way to sort of show, what are the gaps in the system, whether it's the food system or the composting infrastructure system, and show that, hey, you could use this to determine, what type of composting facilities are in your area, what aren't. Is there a need for one that your university might be able to support and host? So use, use mapping and technology to educate and create solutions. Again, working across departments. Finally, there's the training and outreach. So both during and after a program is implemented, you will need to have some type of a training and outreach program for your cafeteria users, your customers, anybody eating food on your campus, for your staff, housekeeping, kitchen staff. You need to talk about the importance of why you're lining carts or why you're not lining carts, and work with and educate food service providers on how to provide and how to manage those to-go containers. There will be some training on equipment, disposals, pulpers, maybe compactors, and then there's always room for educating on minimizing odors. The food waste is always going to be there. It's either separated from the trash or it's part of the trash. So sometimes it's just a perception of the food waste. People think it stinks, and it's no different than trash. So sometimes the odor is just a perception. So trying to keep that at bay is a matter of outreach and education. And then always coming back and checking with sustainability goals to make sure that you're aligning with those goals and you continue to provide the results of the program to your leadership for support. So finally then, just a reminder that composting is a way to close the loop, and it's a way that you can be a leader to support the growing trend of zero waste, sustainability, and local healthy food. And that's it for my presentation. I'd be happy to take questions at this point.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to just go ahead and launch in because we've got a couple of good questions here. The first one is, what are some industrial uses of food waste?
Okay, so the industrial use was, maybe I didn't show that correctly on the chart, but it would be more anaerobic digestion. It would be the wastewater treatment plant option.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Next question is, How does the compost industry feel about compostable plastics, greenware, stuff from people like Cedar Grove in the Pacific Northwest, et cetera?
Oh boy. That's a that's a difficult question to answer. I think, you know, there are a lot of different viewpoints out there about compostable serviceware. So it really depends on, you know, there are some viewpoints where people think of compostable serviceware still as disposables. Okay, so by purchasing and using compostable serviceware, you're just adding to the waste stream, and that's a fair point of view in some situations. I think that, like at the home, in the household, compostable plates and cups and that sort of thing most likely are, you know, usually are not needed. We can wash our dishes at home. But if you're in a stadium, let's say at your football stadium, you know, there is no option for reusables. There might be an option for, you know, a cup, you know, souvenir cup that could be take home, that people would like to buy and take home and reuse. But for the most part, compostable serviceware is a great option for those closed-loop type systems where it's basically everything either goes into recycling or composting. There are some programs being rolled out where maybe plates and forks and spoons might be compostable, but that cups might be a better option to have clear cups that are recyclable. They're number one PET plastic. So again, you're still recycling or composting. It's still zero waste, but you are minimizing the amount of compostable serviceware that's manufactured and used and composted. So it really depends on the situation. It also depends on how your compost is being processed. Some, you know, you can't feed compostable serviceware to worms. So, you know, if you're doing vermicomposting, then you can't use that. So it really depends. Now, if you have a large, you know, windrow composting site or aerostatic pile, then you know, depending on what equipment and what the length of their composting process, you know, what the situation is there, it might be just fine to use compostable serviceware. So it's highly, you know, it depends on the situation at your facility and at your compost site.
Excellent. Kind of a more technical question that was from one of the slides is, what is the difference between covered ASP and the normal ASP? Why would the covers be needed? Okay,
so the covered ASP, so the difference is one's covered and one's not. The covered ASP is sometimes used in a climate where maybe a colder climate. It is sometimes used for compost that maybe is, you know, like a manure or food waste, where there might be more odors generated. And it's also great for a system that, you know, a smaller covered ASP system is speeds up the process. So it keeps retains the heat and the correct moisture. And so for a smaller system, it might be that you have more control But it, the difference is mostly usually has to do with the climate, and also how much control you want to have over the parameters in your pile.
Excellent. Let's just take one more question, then we'll be able to move on. Have comparisons been made of the relative benefits of recycled versus compostable utensils?
Gosh, I feel like I cannot answer that question. Recycled utensils are, typically utensils, plastic utensils are made from a polystyrene for the most part, and typically those are not recyclable. I think it's rare to find a utensil that is made from a recyclable plastic that is acceptable curbside at a recycling facility. So I think the compostable utensil option is a good option out there if it's acceptable with your composter, and if you don't have the option to use reusable forks and spoons. But recycling of those products is not common.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Nicole. Well, let's move on to our next presentation. Melissa is the Sustainability Officer at the University of Winnipeg. She has nearly 7 years of experience with environmental NGOs, co-ops, and sustainable transportations in Manitoba, New Brunswick, and has spent 6 months working on sustainable small-scale agriculture in Honduras. Melissa is very well traveled, it seems. Prior to moving into the Sustainability Office, she spent 4 years working in the President's Office at the University of Winnipeg as a research officer. In the spring of 2013, she initiated a beekeeping club on campus where she mentors students in keeping honeybees on the roof of the University of Winnipeg. She is founding member of the Winnipeg First Car Sharing Co-op, Peg City Car Co-op, and has been a board member since 2010. She has spoken on sustainable transportation, car sharing, and urban beekeeping in the university classrooms, conferences, and in the news. Melissa holds a BA in politics from the University of Winnipeg and an MA in international affairs from Carleton University in Ottawa. Go ahead, Melissa, take us away.
Thank you very much. I feel the need to. I don't have a lot of waste reduction history. However, I feel the need to say that I did take a master composter course, which is like a train-the-trainer thing for backyard composting, and then I've successfully vermicomposted in my house for about 6 years, which I think is pretty successful. But moving on to composting, or larger scale composting here on campus. I think my thesis generally here is, and following from Nicole's presentation, is that sort of the context that you have on campus, where your campus is located, and the resources you have, but also the partnerships that you forge, have really determined the level of success that we've had so far in composting on campus and in designing our compost program, which has evolved over time, which I'll talk about. Something to note is that our university is a small downtown campus, so we are limited in the land space that we have, and we are surrounded by residential neighborhoods to the north and to the west that you see here. So if we were to create any kind of on-site compost program that created any smell, that would be a problem for us. We also happen to be a winter city. Winnipeg is very cold in the winter for about 3 or 4 months of the year, reaching minus 40. So if we were doing any outdoor composting, it would slow down and or stop in the winter months, which would affect our productivity. And then also we are located in the city center, but there is no municipal organic waste program that we could benefit from. Yeah, so next slide, please. So currently, our composting program is we have the only campus-based pre- and post-consumer program in the province of Manitoba. So it's the post-consumer collection that is unique here. It started in 2007, but in a bit I'll talk about how it came about and how it was initiated in the first place. And then it started initially with just the food service providers, and then post-consumer started just in the food service areas. And then we've actually gone through quite a large period of growth in the past 10 years. We've grown, our physical space has grown by 55%. And with that, we've actually been able to also collect compost in offices and in the other sort of hallways and common spaces across campus. So at this point, we've got compost bins in every building across campus. So with partnerships, and so I realized afterwards that I probably should have included one more slide in around this section. So, but what really initiated or got us going in 2007 was with the institution creating a policy around waste reduction. So but historically how that was driven was starting in 1997, the small environmental student group on campus and the student association started doing waste audits, just the students, getting in there, getting dirty and counting waste with the intention eventually of either diverting it or reducing waste being sent to landfill. And I did read there's a little institutional record of what happened in the early 2000s following that. But around 2004, the idea was they were going to create, so the student group and the student association was going to initiate an on-site composting program. And their barriers at the time, I guess, or I'm assuming, were institutional because at the time there was kind of there had been a period of not really that much happening on campus. There was no sustainable director or anything like that. And additionally, the other barrier that they faced was in smaller scale compost operations, as probably a lot of you know, is that you can't include bones or meat or dairy or oils. And so they were going to really need an advanced way of making sure that the organic waste being produced by our third-party food service operator at the time would be separated out. That on-site compost program never happened, but concurrently when that was trying to happen, there was another group of students who approached the administration about creating a sustainability working group to see whether, what the university could do around sustainability, create policies, maybe establish an office. And also in 2004, we got a new president, who was Dr. Lloyd Axworthy, and he was much more open to hearing new ideas. So it was kind of just this meeting of events in around 2004, 2005 that really started moving things forward around sustainability more broadly on campus. And Dr. Axworthy decided to commit the University of Winnipeg to meeting Canada's then Kyoto targets, which were reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by 6% to 1990 levels by 2012. Canada is no longer a signatory of Kyoto, but we eventually did meet that target. But following from that momentum, there were policies that were formal policies that were created in 2007. There was a formal sustainability policy. There was an office created for sustainability, and there was, following that, smaller policies like waste minimization or procurement policies that focus on sustainability. So the waste minimization policy, actually, it's based around the idea of reducing emissions coming from waste. And so, as Nicole mentioned, a major source of greenhouse gas emissions comes from organic waste and the creation of methane. So there had been all these different streams sort of moving us forward, but nothing had been formalized. And in 2007, it was officially formalized, and And I'll talk about the partners that we created then in a bit, but I'll move on to the next slide, please. So initially, the students were trying to work with this third-party campus food service provider. That is, it's a common one on many, I think, North American, but particularly Canadian campuses. But at the time, the campus administration was getting a lot of complaints about the quality of food. It was based on mostly burgers and French fries, and if you were vegan or vegetarian, there was few options for you. And so what happened was they were looking for a new contract with a new food service provider, and actually the University of Winnipeg's arm's length Community Renewal Corporation partnered with another local organization to create diversity food sources as a social enterprise on campus. And this was a great boon for waste diversion because they wholeheartedly partnered with campus sustainability to work on waste reduction, but also they purchased all compostable takeout containers, or they offer reusable containers as much as possible. And in general, they've been a really great partner because they focus on buying all or mostly local and organic foods, and they hire low-income people and train them and promote them, and they've done really great things. Like recently, they actually are eliminating this year the compostable coffee cups for, because a lot of them, we were getting about 3,000 pounds of compostable coffee cups sent to landfill every year. So in the end, it still became a source of waste, but it was a good step forward. And next to our partners in the next slide. So we've actually had, this is our most recent partner in this slide, but we've actually had 3 partners. In 2007, the initial partner was Rockwood Prison, which is a minimum security men's prison about 20 kilometers outside of Winnipeg, so outside of the city, and they have a small in-prison farm or garden program. And so we set up a contract with them to pick up our waste, but again, I don't exactly know entirely what initiated the change, but I have some good ideas. I think because it was a smaller scale composting program, again, it required a lot of sorting of compost, what could be composted and what couldn't, such as meat, bones, and dairy, and so it probably ended up being a lot more work and education. But also in 2009, there was another option. So because there's no municipal compost pickup, there was no large-scale compost producers or managers in and around Winnipeg. But in 2009, a local gardening company actually ended up establishing a large-scale industrial and commercial compost pickup business. And the benefit of that was that it was actually located within the city limits, but right on the edge, so it was much closer. But also they were able to pick up all of our compostable waste, all of our landscaping waste, and anything food waste that we were producing. And so this is definitely a boon, and they were able also to deal with the compostable takeout containers. And so the volume of waste that we were able to divert increased dramatically. And so that worked well for us for a while. The problem was they had been located within the city limits for quite some time. It also happened that Winnipeg is a growing city. There's a lot of new suburbs, and it just so happened that as the suburban development grew closer and closer to their site, they were experiencing more and more complaints from homeowners near their site about scent, smell, and so they were experiencing some problems, and they kept getting threatened to shut down their service. So we were faced with the possibility that the pickup service of coming to pick up organic waste might stop. It never did, and they were great partners. Eventually, they were forced to move their operations further outside the city, which definitely incurs more transportation costs and more greenhouse gas emissions in transporting the organic waste. But in 2011, the Forks, which is a year-round meeting place right in downtown Winnipeg, east it's about 3 miles, maybe less than that, from where we are now, from where our campus is. The Forks is a tourism and meeting spot, right? There's two rivers that meet right in the center of Winnipeg, and it's historically for a long time been a meeting place, and they offer year-round programming, and they've got a number of food kiosks and a number of, I think, 3 or 4 restaurants on site. And they also actively set for themselves really aggressive environmental targets. So they set themselves a target 0 for greenhouse gas emissions, so they've set up geothermal heating in their main buildings. And they also got a grant for this BioVator system, which is essentially cooks compost and can finish compost in about 2 weeks. And it can handle about 1,000 pounds of compost a day. And so they put they've got a lot of green space, so they put all of their landscaping, organic waste, and then all of their restaurant waste into this BioVator. And they weren't actually collecting as much waste or organic matter as the BioVator could handle, so they reached out to the University of Winnipeg to offer collecting our organic waste, which was nice. It ends up being a source of revenue for them, and then for us, the benefit is that we're not transporting the organic compost very far. And the BioVator is great because, excuse me, it offers, it's able to compost year-round despite the cold weather. You can see the gentleman wearing his winter jacket here. And it composts quickly enough that it doesn't take up too much space in a crowded downtown area. Next slide, please. So, despite our successes, we have faced a number of challenges, and a lot of it is reporting and understanding exactly how much waste we're generating. We have done a number of waste audits, and then we have the feedback coming from the service providers who pick up our waste and weigh on occasion the amount of waste that we're producing, and those numbers don't always match up, so it's hard to set targets and to understand how well we're doing. Although we know organics takes up, historically with waste audits, it takes up about 1/3 to 40% of our waste streams, so it's a significant portion. But it doesn't seem like we are capturing as much as we can, and I'll show in the next slide in a bit why. But we have a goal of diverting 65% of our waste by 2015. But again, last year we only diverted about 30%, so we still have a ways to go, and there's far too much that ends up in landfills still. Next slide, please. The other challenge is with bags. In a post-consumer collection with, across campus and in office spaces and in public spaces, that means a lot of bags. It keeps it as clean as possible, transferring the compost from these collection points to a larger collection point where it's then picked up by the forks, and so they tend to be very expensive, and then they're more prone to ripping, and I think we're spending somewhere around $15,000 on bags every year, which really eats into any kind of business case you might make. And so if anybody has any, certainly we've also spent a lot of labor time just trying out bags and searching out compostable bags, which is a bit of a, but I think we're moving forward. But yeah, it's been an ongoing challenge. And then the next slide, please. So while it's been relatively easy on the pre-consumer with our great food service provider, on the other end, the issue of bins and education and signage has been an ongoing challenge. So we'll put bins out and then they'll move. So if we put signs on the wall, obviously they're not pointing to anything anymore. This is something that's happened. Also, originally the bins, to save cost, we only bought a minimum number of bins, but in the end, as you can see, based on the bins that are there, the waste bin or the garbage bin is still always the largest bin, which doesn't proportionally represent what should be going in there and is in a visual cue. And then also educating people to know what goes where has been a challenge. Additionally, cleaning staff has, sometimes they'll come and collect the various waste streams, but then put them in the wrong bins on the other end. So then, even this week, I got a call from the Forks telling us that they got one bin full of recycling, which is frustrating for them and it's frustrating for us, and so it's something that we have to continue to work on. And then additionally, external food service providers on campus. We do have, Starbucks and other restaurants that are just surrounding us. And if we have compostable cups coming from diversity, but then, disposable landfill, cups from one place, and teaching, the public and students what goes where always remains a challenge for us. Next slide, please. So this is where we're going forward. This year we got a grant for these new bins. We've piloted these bins this year, and the idea is to visually, we're trying to keep it as simple as possible and not make composting or waste diversion or sorting a challenge. We have actual images of what is compostable, what goes to landfill, and we're trying to visually represent the proportion of waste that will end up in the different waste streams. Additionally, we've created these icons, which we will be also be adding to the bins, adding into the waste collection area so that icons just can be matched with icons and keeping it as simple as possible. Additionally, we've hired student educators previously, but we are also again hiring student educators with the new bins to teach students about and staff about where and how to sort their waste. Yeah, and that's it in a nutshell.
Excellent. Well, let's take some questions. First question, does Winnipeg municipality provide any signage/education programs for waste sorting?
The municipality of Winnipeg they only do recycling, and even that, I wouldn't say they've done the greatest job at it so far. They've changed the way that recycling has been collected over the years, and so even just doing that has changed. But so around organics collection, they don't do any educational work.
Okay, perfect. Next question is, what efforts have you made or are you currently making regarding sorting challenges from cleaning staff or facilities, removal of bins, etc.? Has this challenge been reduced over time, or has it been a constant issue so far?
It's been a constant issue. Part of it is that our cleaning staff tends to be high turnover in our cleaning staff. We know that, and it happened. The cleaning service that we hire tends to hire a lot of new immigrants. So sometimes English instruction is a challenge. So we're trying to actually. So we haven't taken large steps to address this yet until this year. We're creating those icons to just have everything match up and be as easy as possible. Additionally, we're engaging with the cleaning staff service provider to do classroom education, and then we're also reaching out to our English language program that we have on campus to assist in creating easier educational materials for our cleaning staff. So it's an ongoing issue that we're dealing with, but we're hoping that these new initiatives will help us out with dealing with that sorting issue.
Perfect. Have you considered education sessions during orientation?
Yes. So it was, student orientation just happened. We just had our first week of class last week. We did include, in their orientation session, we included a waste section of that. And then we also we've put out extra student educators near bins in the major collection areas to target students at this time of the year. And then we will follow that up throughout the year as need be.
Kind of on that same note, how do student educators, you mentioned, go about educating your campus community about the program? What types of programming/outreach do they do?
Well, this year the Campus Sustainability Office actually sent out an email to professors. That was the one step where we will actually go to classrooms and do a three PowerPoint slide presentation about waste and a few other things around sustainability that students can get involved in. And that's been, I think we've only done about 5 or 6, but it's a good start. And then additionally, the waste educators, we just gave them T-shirts, and they actually just stand beside bins for a shift or two every once in a while, and then and try and let students know or help them if they're confused about what goes where in the bin.
Another question is, how often do you have to empty your recycling bins, especially the composting and bottle/can bins?
Well, we have cleaning staff that service specific areas daily, so they'll clean them out. And then particularly the compost areas in offices get emptied out daily because any scent issues with rotting food would be a big problem. And then at the collection, the major collection area at the dock, we have the forks come and pick up our compost twice a week. I'm not entirely sure about recycling.
Okay. Next question is, what company did you purchase your recycling bins from?
Oh, that is a good question. That recycling bin, the 3-stream one, was actually designed for us in partnership with this local organization called the Canadian Beverage and Recycling Coalition. However, the pilot bins that we had were built by a company called Clean River. So they're essentially the same design.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, it doesn't look like we have any more questions. So let me just get out of that. I'd like to thank our panel members today for a great information-packed program. The next session in the series will be Creating a Leaner, Meaner Waste Management Program. Try and say that 3 times fast. On Thursday, November 13th from 1 p.m. till 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We look forward to seeing you all there, and as we noted at the beginning of this program, we'll be putting up a recording of this program as well as the slides standalone for everyone to enjoy. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.